Okay, picture this. It's November 1944. You're deep under the ocean, sealed inside a steel tube so narrow your shoulders can barely fit. There's no way out, no escape hatch, and sitting next to you are the ashes of your best friend. This isn't a nightmare. This is the beginning of a one-way mission. This is the story of the Kaiten, Japan's human torpedo.
We've made a beautiful creature. Those were the words of Lieutenant Sekio Nishina. You'd think he was looking at some masterpiece, right? But the crazy part? He was looking at the very weapon that was built to be his own coffin.
So, the stage is set. The date is November 20th, 1944, and the location? Ulithi Atoll. This was a massive, critical naval base for the Americans in the Pacific, and it's here that the first ever Kaiten mission is about to launch a secret attack, aimed right at the heart of the US Navy.
I mean, just try to put yourself in that cockpit for a second. It's incredibly grim. Nishina is sealed in, period. There is no getting out. All he has are his controls, his target out there in the dark, and a small box holding the remains of his closest friend, the man who helped him design this very machine. A promise he was about to keep.
But that brings up the big question, right? Why? Why would anyone build a weapon like this? To really get it, we've got to rewind the clock about 2 years to one single battle that completely flipped the script for Japan and the Pacific and led them down this dark path.
The Battle of Midway in June 1942. It was a complete and utter catastrophe for the Japanese Navy. We're talking 4 of their absolute best aircraft carriers sunk, and maybe even worse, they lost a huge number of their most skilled, most experienced pilots. In just a few days, their entire advantage in the Pacific was just gone. And suddenly, the future looked incredibly bleak.
And it's in this atmosphere of total desperation, with defeat looking more and more certain, that 2 young officers start thinking way outside the box. Lieutenant Sekio Nishina and his friend, Lieutenant Hiroshi Kuroki, decided that desperate times called for truly desperate measures.
This was the heart of it all. See, at the time, they were piloting these little midget submarines that were pretty much becoming death traps thanks to new American sonar. Their odds of surviving a mission were already almost zero. So Kuroki's logic was grim but simple. If we're going to die anyway, why die for nothing? Why not make sure we take an enemy ship with us? Now you can imagine when they first pitched this idea of a human-guided torpedo, Naval Command basically laughed them out of the room. It was too radical, just unthinkable. So to prove how dead serious they were, Nishina and Kuroki did something shocking. They resubmitted their plan, written in their own blood. Yeah, that got people's attention. And this is what came out of it. The Kaiten. It was basically a giant torpedo, almost 50 feet long, with a cockpit shoehorned inside and a massive 1.5-ton warhead on the front. But here's the crucial detail. The Navy initially wanted an escape hatch, but the designers scrapped it. It was too complex, too unreliable. So unlike a kamikaze pilot in a plane who could, in theory, turn back, once you were launched in a Kaiten, that was it. It was a one-way trip, guaranteed.
But the human cost of this weapon started long before it ever saw a single battle. The path to that first mission was paved with tragedy, a story that centers on the fate of one of its own creators.
You have to understand, there was no instruction manual for this thing. The designers, Nishina and Kuroki, along with the first batch of volunteer pilots, were literally writing the rulebook as they went. Every single training exercise was a roll of the dice, pushing this unstable new machine to its absolute limit. Then came the fateful day. The seas were rough, and Nishina warned his friend Kuroki not to go out. But Kuroki insisted, arguing, that real combat conditions wouldn't be perfect either. He went out, and the powerful currents overwhelmed his sub. It plunged, nose first, deep into the mud on the seafloor. He was trapped inside his own invention. Now trapped in the dark, with his oxygen slowly running out, Kuroki didn't panic. In an act of incredible composure, he grabbed a pen and calmly wrote a detailed report of the incident, taking full responsibility so that the project wouldn't get shut down. His final written words were a declaration of loyalty to his emperor and his country. Hiroshi Kuroki was only 22 years old. Just 22! For his best friend Nishina, the blow was absolutely devastating. And in that moment of grief, he made a solemn vow. He would carry Kuroki's ashes with him on their first real mission, so they could fulfill their shared dream together. And that brings us full circle, right back to where we started, November 20th, 1944. Nishina is in the lead Kaiten, his friend's ashes in the cockpit with him. Their desperate plan, conceived in defeat and signed in blood, is finally about to face the ultimate test.
The mission goes wrong almost immediately. It is pure chaos. 4 Kaitens launch. One gets stuck on a reef and blows up, basically sending a giant signal flare to the entire American fleet. Another is destroyed by depth charges. A third gets snagged in anti-torpedo nets and is blown to pieces. And just like that, Nishina is the only one left.
The whole US fleet is now on high alert, searching for them. Nishina knows that if he raises his periscope, he'll be spotted instantly. So he has to make an impossible choice. He lowers the scope and pilots the final approach completely blind, using only his compass, his gyroscope, and a clock. The sheer nerve that must have taken is just breathtaking. He pushes the throttle all the way forward. The Kaiten surges, hitting its top speed of 30 knots. That's about 34 miles an hour. For an underwater vehicle in 1944, that is terrifyingly fast. He's a blur under the water, a guided missile closing in on his target. In the final moments, he raises the periscope one last time, and the enormous steel hull of an American ship fills his vision. He turns to the urn beside him and speaks to the ashes of his friend, Hiroshi Kuroki. They had done it. They had fulfilled their promise. Then, a massive explosion. The 1.5-ton warhead detonates, tearing the USS Mrs. Inouye, a huge fleet oiler, completely in two. The ship's cargo of aviation fuel ignites into a colossal fireball, lighting up the entire harbor. 63 American sailors were killed in the attack.
So, by its own grim definition, Nishina's mission was a success. But when you pull back the lens and look at the entire Kaiten program, the story changes. It becomes a story of unbelievable sacrifice for almost no strategic result.
The numbers really do tell the story here. Throughout the war, a total of 106 young Japanese men died piloting these Kaitens, and in exchange for those 106 lives, they sank a grand total of 3 American ships. The human cost was just staggering for a weapon that had virtually zero impact on the outcome of the war.
Today, on the very island where these men trained for their final missions, there's a memorial museum. It's there not to glorify the weapon, but to remember the young pilots who volunteered, who genuinely believed that their sacrifice could save their nation.
And that's the really complicated legacy of the Kaiten. It was a weapon born from utter desperation, piloted by men with a profound, unshakable sense of duty. And it leaves us with a really difficult question to wrestle with. How should history remember men who showed such incredible courage in the service of such a terrible cause?